Okay, so hopefully this is working. Hi, everyone. This is Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot, and I am very pleased today to have with me Robert David Steele. And I think you can see both of us here on screen. And I've got a chat room over here that I'm going to just make sure that people can hear us okay, because you never know when there might be some strange goings on. But yes, it looks like we are live, and so that's great. I can see that my video is kind of jerky here. I'm not sure why. It shouldn't be, because it's really not rocket science. This kind of thing should be working fine, but who knows what goes on. So I've got a bio for you here, Robert, and I'm going to try to read some of it, but I really prefer you to talk about yourself. So I'm going to skip through it really quickly, and then we're going to turn it over to you. So Robert David Steele is unique for being a former spy. He is the most published intelligence reformer in the English language, as well as the top Amazon reviewer for nonfiction, reading in 98 categories. Recently nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, a longtime manager of a global small business who has trained over 7,500 mid-career professionals from over, 66 countries in open source and methods of intelligence. His current passion is a nonprofit educational company, Earth Intelligence Network, EIN, and it says they have designed a world brain construct and a PhD in stewardship that emphasizes holistic analytics, true cost economics, and open source everything engineering. This summer, EIN is sponsoring the #Unrig, a 90-day national tour with Dr. Cynthia McKinney to educate voters on how they can take power back across 435 congressional districts. And it goes on, and it's on my website for those of you that want to read more about him. We've got him here anyway, so let's just bring him on and say hello to everyone. Please, Robert Steele.
I'm very glad to be with you. I know of your work, and I see this as a real opportunity to connect with your audience.
Excellent. And I'm sure they feel the same way. I've been following your work and your many interviews. And I think what I'd like to do is have you give a brief background in terms of your intelligence work, because I know you worked for CIA and you also worked for Marine intelligence, I believe. So can you clarify that? Talk about your role a bit?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And let me say that my work really began as the son of an oil man growing up overseas. I spent 10 years in Asia and 10 years in Latin America, and that helped me see the real world. And then I had university degrees with theses on multinational corporations and home and host country issues, on predicting revolution. And the second graduate degree was on strategic information mismanagement by the US government. As an intelligence professional, I was accepted by the CIA. It's a very competitive process. I think it's 1 in 25,000 gets accepted as a clandestine operations case officer. I did 3 back-to-back tours overseas. I skipped all internships. I went directly overseas. It's very unusual for someone to do 3 back-to-back tours overseas. I was one of the first case officers assigned to do terrorism, to chase terrorists full-time in the 1980s. I had 3 headquarters tours in information technology and satellite futures management and in counterintelligence. And then the Marine Corps, where I had been a Marine Corps infantry officer and converted to a Marine Corps intelligence officer as a reserve officer. I had been working at the service level for the Marine Corps, and they asked me to come back to the Marine Corps from the CIA, and I left the CIA after 9 years there. Most of my counterparts only lasted 5. They found the environment toxic. But I went back to the Marine Corps, where I was the senior civilian, the second ranking civilian in Marine Corps intelligence, responsible for creating the Marine Corps Intelligence Center. Now, what's really important is to point out that that was the newest national intelligence analysis capability at the time. It had access to everything, everything that NSA provided, everything that CIA had, and so forth. And in one little corner, we had a PC connected to the internet. And back then, the internet was something called the source. That was the Google of its time. Within 2 weeks, our analysts were lining up for the internet. And I went over to them, I said, what on earth are you doing? And they said, there's nothing in the classified databases about Burundi, Haiti, Somalia, all these other third world places that the Marine Corps is the only person that really cares about, along with the Department of State and the Agency for International Development. That's when I realized that the secret intelligence community was an empty shell, that it wasn't actually able to serve the president and the cabinet officers and the action officers across all of the cabinet departments with what's called decision support. Instead, the intelligence community has become obsessed with secret collection that it doesn't process. And I've learned since leaving the intelligence community that the biggest business in the intelligence community today is spying on and blackmailing our own members of Congress. And that's one of the things that really causes me grave concern. And it's one of the reasons why Congresswoman McKinney and I are running #unrig. We want to help the citizens of this country understand that they can clean up the government with an ethical, legal, nonviolent demand for election reform that will give us an honest Congress in 2018.
Okay, well, a lot to sort of chew there. I have to say, you've got a very illustrious resume. There's no doubt about it. And what we've got here on the website versus what you've got on your own site is quite extensive on your own site. And you've got many, many links to a lot of the work you've done. So I don't want to shortchange that. I am wondering if you are, sort of being harassed by any of the agencies at this time due to the kind of work you're doing and the comments you're making, how public you are?
I love that question. I really, really like that question very much. The short answer is no. First off, I've never violated my lifetime secrecy oath. I'm an intelligence reformer, not a whistleblower. I mean, I admire whistleblowers. It takes guts to come out and be someone like Bill Binney, who's a very good friend and someone I deeply admire, or Kurt Wiebe, or any of a number of others. But my books are actually submitted to the CIA Publications Review Board. And my first two books, which had forewords by former chairman of the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence, David Warren, Democrat from Oklahoma. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma, so he had a certain interest in helping me. And then Senator Pat Roberts, still serving today, from Kansas. And so my books are approved by the CIA Publications Review Board, but I don't give away secrets in my book. I'm simply writing substantive critical policy. And I'm always careful to say that 90% of the people in the intelligence community are good people trapped in a bad system. I will say that I have also been successfully marginalized for 30 years. I mean, there was a time in the 1990s when Time Magazine and Associated Press and others were starting to write about me. And what I've learned since then was that CIA would go around to each of those people, because they control the main media outlets in this country, and say, no, we don't want Steele publicized. We don't want you to elevate Steele. So they're not harassing me as much as marginalizing me. And God bless Donald Trump, because my voice is being heard now because the alt-right video interviewers adopted me, and they adopted me because I wrote the Trump Revolution series, and I've been pro-Trump for some time now. I'm starting to lose my happiness with Trump. I'm not feeling the love. But it's because of Donald Trump saying we have a rigged system that Cynthia McKinney and I are now able to come out with #unrig and offer our citizens an opportunity. So I really have to give the IC credit. I have not been harassed. In fact, my harassers tend to be Zionists rather than the intelligence community. And I distinguish between anti-Zionism, which is everyone's responsibility, and anti-Semitism, which is absolutely despicable and under no circumstances should be tolerated by anyone. We have 9 million loyal, decent American Jews in the United States of America, and every single one of them is a patriot and not part of the problem.
Okay. Well, that's quite a blanket statement, but we'll let it pass for the moment because of your enthusiasm for, you know, the Jewish race, call it what you will. Although some people say it's a religion, not a race.
Well, there's that. I mean, I've actually written something very interesting online about the Holocaust and Zionism and these myths, and I won't go into it now. But what I really think is important on any issue is scanning all the evidence and critical thinking. People have to decide for themselves. I absolutely oppose being told what to think. And that's what most government and authority figures are trying to do today, to include dumbing us down with mediocre educational programs and a mass media that is in fact the fake news media. It's people like you that are the alternative media that are trying to bring truth out. I like that. Okay, well,
actually, all the people that tried to convince you not to come on my show, notwithstanding.
Only 4.
Okay, 4.
Only 4. And you did a wonderful job of gaining my trust, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to interact.
All right. Well, we're happy to have you. And I'm not that scary, I don't think, or dangerous, even though I have quite a reputation.
That's what they said about Hillary Clinton.
Okay. Not sure I like the comparison, but whatever.
Okay, it's a bad comparison. There's no comparison. All right. Forgive me, please.
No, it's okay. Okay, so at this point, you know, I want to let you know that we do have a chat room. It's a texting chat room. So what I do when you see me looking over here,
I'm more inclined to have your questions, not questions, because the trolls are out there. I'm not answering questions from trolls.
No problem. But what happens is towards the end of the show, if we have 15 minutes or so, we'd like to be able to let the audience ask a few questions. I will be screening the questions, so I will not ask you a question that is ludicrous or whatever. So yeah, that would just be great for the audience to know. So at this point, what I want to do is start with the Alex Jones situation, because this is your opportunity. This is your sort of platform to talk about what went on with Alex Jones, clarify it for people. I did write an article. I consider my article to be actually a prep for this show today. So for those listening and watching, especially once this goes onto YouTube, which it will do immediately when we're done here, I do encourage you to read that article to kind of clarify things and see where Camelot stands with regard to what went on between Alex and Robert Steele. But go ahead, Robert, tell us your version of events and what really went on with the mainstream news, how they picked it up and ran with it and sort of took it out of context.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it was a hit job. First off, Alex and I had a 2-hour interview. Never mind all the commercials for supplements and so forth. We spent 2 hours together. And during that time, toward the end, he brought up pedophilia because the Vatican has had a couple of major scandals recently. And I talked about the fact that I'm a commissioner for the International Tribunal of Natural Justice. And we're doing a year-long project on pedophilia. I have written the foreword for a book on pedophilia, and I have approved and helped develop an outline for a book on pedophilia. And that book on pedophilia includes, and I discussed this with Alex, a number of things, including the kidnapping of children, using children as sex slaves, murdering children, and drinking their blood and harvesting their body parts and bone marrow, which, by the way, Peter Thiel now is huge on blood transfusions from children, which is perfectly legal. But it kind of validates the fact that there has been, over history, an appreciation of children's blood as a major supplement in anti-aging. And then from there, we went into the use of children as substitutes for chimpanzees and blacks in medical and space experimentation, okay? And I don't know if you remember, but we used to send chimpanzees into space. And I don't know if you remember the Tuskegee experiments with black people and syphilis and so forth, okay? So children are the most vulnerable element of our society. And when you can take a child away from its parents and it has no guardians, they become essentially experimental animals. And that is kind of where I was going with this. Now, as it happens, somebody decided to conflate this and put words in my mouth that never occurred. There are no sex slave colonies on Mars. There is a colony on Mars. We've had one there for 15 years. There are 10,000 people there now, and they're never coming home. Okay, and that's all I'm going to say about Mars. What I will also say, however, about NASA is that I've since realized in doing some research that NASA is where we put half of the Nazi scientists that we saved from World War II.
Absolutely.
CIA has the other half. So I have since come to the conclusion, as a specific result of this hit job, I've come to the conclusion that NASA is extraordinarily evil and requires a great deal of research, and people like you and Michael Salla and others should be commended for looking closely at every aspect of NASA, most of which in its darkest corners are not being revealed to the public or even to the president, and certainly not to Congress.
Okay, and William Tompkins did sort of highlight this as well. He's someone I interviewed who is in many ways, let's say, sponsored to some degree by the Navy and backed by the Navy, I believe. They certainly are sort of steering his career, if you want to call it that. He's written a book, and don't have the title in front of me, but nonetheless, I interviewed him. It's a very important interview and covers a lot of his important information, much of which does relate to Nazis. It relates to the moon, Mars, and our interaction with and the reptilian, let's say, what we might call infestation of NASA by way of bloodlines connected with the Nazis. And that goes back to Aldebaran and so on. And I understand that you don't kind of follow, or you're not somebody who is an expert in this area. So we're not going to go further down that road with you. But just for my audience's purposes to understand how William Tompkins' testimony in here dovetails with what you've just said. Now,
I appreciate that, and I do have one of the 98 categories that I read in is extraterrestrial intelligence.
Oh, okay, great. So
does
that mean sci-fi or not? Only nonfiction?
I only do nonfiction.
Okay.
But I've recently reviewed 2 books. This is one of them, Project for Human Extinction.
Okay.
And I highly recommend this book. And this is the other book that I have reviewed in the immediate aftermath of this media hit job on me. And I recommend this book also. Here's the bottom line. The public is now at a point where, given a choice between believing me or believing NASA, they will believe me. And that is new. And that is good. And that is made possible by people like you and Michael Salla and William Tompkins and others. The public has to start reading and learning and listening and thinking for itself. The bottom line is that the U.S. government lies about everything, whether it's a base on Mars or the unemployment rate or vaccines being good for you or food being weaponized. The U.S. government is in the business of lying to the public while picking its pocket. And that's why Cynthia McKinney and I have started #Unrigged to give 435 meetups, one in every congressional district, a chance to elect an honest Congress and stop the U.S. government from feeding off of the people.
Okay. You know, what I want to do is I do want to drill down into that to unrig and sort of the machinations of why you're doing, et cetera. But I'd like to sort of hold that off towards the end.
Sure.
So we've got this huge list that you gave me because you're like.
Well, it's not a huge list. It's one we agreed to. I think it has 5 items on it.
No, well, okay. I'm looking at your table of contents. I'm actually considering.
Oh, no. That's, I never intended for you to discuss
all right.
that. Your listeners can go to phibetaiota.net. They can look up deep state. They can look up false flag. They can look up 9/11. They can look up pedophilia. I'm an open book. I mean, everything I think and write is open. And my public personal website, robertdavidsteele.com, has everything I've ever written, free, online. There are no secrets here, and there is no switching. What is it? P shell or whatever you call it. This is I am a what you see is what you get person.
Okay, fair enough. So along the lines of where we're going here, and I do want to say that there was some confusion on Alex's part, and I actually think
the cancellation. Alex was supposed to interview Cynthia McKinney, and I want to say that I think in his interview with me, Alex was much healthier and better than he has been in the past, because he's really in the past looked like he's taking too many of his own supplements, and they're beginning to give him a Gary Johnson, what's an Aleppo kind of air. And Alex did not interrupt me as much. I really felt I had a very good interview with Alex, and I would welcome an opportunity to go back on Alex's show. But
Okay.
with respect to the show that we had to cancel on, that was not with me, and I did not cancel it. It was
Okay.
with Cynthia McKinney. She had been scheduled to open a major Black event in St. Louis, Missouri, which was commemorating the death of Michael Brown at the hands of neo-Nazi police officers in Ferguson, Missouri. And they shifted her from 8 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock, which is when she had accepted an interview with Alex. So because she had to give primacy to the Black community that was sponsoring her visit to Missouri, she had to cancel with Nico, Alex's guy, and we bent over backwards. We spent an hour and a half at least trying to help Nico identify other people to replace her. So when Alex discredited me as a CIA psyop, that's just an immature, impetuous comment. I mean, first off, Alex is not worth a CIA psyop. And second off, I'm not a CIA psyop. My answer about Mars was in relation to some kind of question that somebody asked. So I like Alex. He serves a major national purpose. But the bottom line is the cancellation was something that had to be done to respect the Black people of St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay, well, what I heard from Alex was actually a call out to invite you back to elaborate.
I love that. But frankly, I'm not interested in talking about Mars anymore.
Oh,
this is
all right. Okay, well, I think
so. You have landed the single exclusive interview that will include extraterrestrial and Mars matters, and then I'm done with it. I'm focusing on integrity in the U.S. government.
Okay, well, let's drill down a little bit. How did you get the information you have about Mars?
There are 3 human sources in addition to the books that I have read.
Okay.
And while I have no direct knowledge, I'm absolutely certain that the combination of the human and nonfiction book sources are correct.
Excellent. Okay, and as far as that goes, do you want to elaborate on anything else with regard to the Mars colony? And I do want to clarify one thing that you said, which I actually highlighted in my article, which had to do with that children would take 20, well, they would be 20 or something like that, 20 odd years to get to Mars, when in reality, you must know that if we have a colony that we get there in a much different way using
there's different approaches. First off, it's not just Mars, it's also Saturn and a few other places. Okay.
That's right.
And second off, I had a chance to discuss this with one of my sources, and they corrected me. The kidnapping of children was in the early days. Now they grow their own. And so I'm not going there. I don't have any direct knowledge. I don't really care. But what we have is what are called 20-year and out one-way trips. And so it makes a certain amount of sense to use people who are very young, who will spend that time growing up toward their final destination. But I have no direct knowledge, and frankly, I really am not interested in talking about this.
All right.
What matters to me is that the U.S. government lies about everything. NASA is lying, okay? And so it's time for the public to decide.
Would you
do they
acknowledge?
Want a government that lies to them, or do they want a government that tells the truth?
Fair enough.
That's what Cynthia McKinney and I are about.
Let's just to finalize this topic and move on. Would you acknowledge then that obviously there is a secret space program?
Oh, absolutely, without question. And when Dr. McKinney was grilling Donald Rumsfeld on the 10th of September, the day before 9/11, Rumsfeld could not explain where the $2.3 trillion that was allegedly missing had gone. It wasn't missing. It wasn't wasted. It was spent on outer space and underground cities, period. And obviously Antarctica. And I have no direct knowledge. But the bottom line here is that the US government has basically been borrowing money and stealing money from the public to do absolutely, utterly outrageous things, most of which are part of a depopulation agenda. And I frankly believe it's time that we crush the US government down to maybe 25% of its present size. And we certainly need to eradicate all secret programs across the US government without exception.
Okay, let me ask you though, if you acknowledge this much, because I know that you're sort of a political guy. You understand.
No, I'm not.
Okay, understand.
I would rather be sailing. The absolute last thing I want to do is run for president, and I'm begging Donald Trump to take leadership of #unrig. I'm begging him because I don't want his job.
Well, you're getting involved in politics. Let me rephrase that, okay? But
well, let me rephrase it. I'm educating constituents. Cynthia McKinney
it's
and I are an
grassroots
educational nonprofit. We are not
politics. Grassroots politics. Would you agree?
No.
No, not even grassroots.
Education.
Education. Okay. Well, be that as it may, I just want to throw something out at you and get your response. This is sort of hypothetical and theoretical. So if we have a secret space program, and if we're dealing with beings from other planets, and the humans that are here on this planet,
you're violating the terms of our agreement. Let's move on.
You can't talk about that. Okay. Well, this is hypothetical, but okay, never mind.
Please move on. All right, stop it. You're really taking advantage here.
All right. Okay. Would you like to talk about the deep state and describe it exactly what you mean?
I would love to talk about the deep state. Okay. Thank you. Now you're back in my comfort zone. What people really need to understand is that the deep state is not just unelected officials. It's not just the neocons and the people in Washington and the two-party tyranny and the secret bureaucrats and the Freemasons and the Knights of Malta and so forth. Those are the best of the servant class. The deep state starts and ends with the Rothschild family and the Jesuits and the superior general of the Jesuits known as the Black Pope. And they control the city of London and Wall Street. And Wall Street and the city of London control generally two parties in every country that block 70% of the voters and all of the small parties from being effective. In the United Kingdom, for example, I believe Manchester was a false flag intended to deprive Jeremy Corbyn of a much earned victory. I think May is complicit in pedophilia and terrorism and false flag and money laundering, the whole bit. At the very top, the U.S. government is as corrupt as the UK government is as corrupt as the U.S. government. So what the deep state is basically doing is exercising control over food and medicine and energy and all of this stuff. And they are essentially treating all of us as farm animals. I mean, the book was written years ago. Now, the beautiful thing about the current state of affairs, and God bless Donald Trump, because he and Bernie Sanders in their own way opened the possibility for an ethical, nonviolent revolution this summer. I mean, I've got people sending me selfies from all over the country, and they all say, Mr. President, you said we have a rigged system. Why aren't you leading #unrigged? And I have the same question for Donald Trump. Mr. President, why aren't you leading #unrigged? And oh, by the way, why is your vice president someone who might be on Vladimir Putin's list of elite pedophiles? Okay, so we have some real issues here.
Okay, well, do you know who Richard Davis is from Pall Mall?
What's that?
Do you know who Richard Davis is from Pall Mall?
Yes, he funded me. He funded me for a while, and then he got upset when I started a new website that he thought was competing with what he wanted to do. So we no longer have any relations, and I have nothing to do with that company.
Okay, well, the reason I bring him up is because to some degree you're kind of talking about a similar topic, which he talked about, which I had him on my show recently. I interviewed him. He talked about how basically the good guys stopped the election from being taken over by Hillary Clinton and her gang.
Yes, and I like very much some of the stuff that he's done. I mean, everything I've written on Amazon is also free online, and your viewers can find it free online. I've written something that's very popular called Donald Trump, Accidental President Under Siege. And it's about a 20-page treatment with 100 linked references on how Donald Trump won by accident while trying desperately to lose, okay? Blocking Hillary Clinton from stealing the same 13 states that she stole from Bernie Sanders was part of it. Her spaz attack in front of the 9/11 memorial was part of it. The Romanian taxi driver that got John Podesta's emails, which are replete with pedophilia across the network, is part of it. The Anthony Weiner laptop showing treason, classified information going to IP addresses in Saudi Arabia and so forth is part of it. There is, I absolutely agree, a white hat part of the US government that is trying to fight back against the deep state. I'm not part of it. I don't know those people, other than Steve Kiesnak maybe, and I think they're all wonderful people and they're to be commended. I also really want to emphasize 90% of the US government is good people trapped in a bad system. What we're talking about with the deep state is a 10% line of control that runs all the way down and across all things. And the Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, and Freemasons are apparently the consiglieri that make things happen. And we've had in intelligence, we've had clear documented cases where a senior CIA officer and a senior KGB officer in the Soviet Union will both commit treason against their country in order to serve the larger New World Order deep state apparatus. But it's not something I've spent a lot of time on, but I am about to publish a 20-page paper on the deep state, and it'll be number 13 in my Trump Revolution series. And it will also be free online, as is my custom.
Okay, so in terms of this unrig, just let me draw your attention to what seems to be somewhat of a contradiction, because I'm curious how you're going to resolve this. In other words, you're talking about the deep state and you fully acknowledge the controls, and yet at the same time you're going to be encouraging people to vote, and you've got this big push for this summer with the your eye on, I guess, the congressional elections coming up. So can you kind of balance that for people, how they can think about that?
Lynn Rothschild, who is kind of the U.S. envoy for the Rothschild family. She's a babe from New Jersey who married well. And she's the one who may have bribed Donald Trump to try to throw the election. And then after he threw the election, she's the one who may have put up $40 billion to persuade him to become part of the deep state. We don't know. In intelligence, we have what we call the hidden planet theory, which is when you absolutely cannot explain why Donald Trump is reneging on all of his promises to end regime change and to end elective wars and so forth, you ask yourself, what could it be? Well, he's subject somewhat to blackmail. He's also subject to bribery. He's a minor billionaire, okay? He's worth at most $2 to $3 billion, and that's complicated because he's got enormous encumbrances on all of his wealth. So my bottom line here is that the deep state has actually already collapsed. Russia and China have created a new axis. There's a new gold-backed currency coming out. Iran, Turkey, Indonesia, all have some things going on. A lot of the gold that was stolen by the Japanese from China and is buried in about 300 different mines in Indonesia, the Philippines, is being pulled out and made into part of this new gold-backed currency. So essentially, the Rothschilds, who have been banned in Russia and the Philippines, are about to start being banned in other countries. And the same is going to happen to George Schwartz, known as George Soros. And there are going to be more extradition orders for George Schwartz Soros, okay? At the same time, there is an increasing pushback against religions that are betraying their publics, and I include the Mormon religion as well as the Catholic religion. there are some real issues here. So one of the things that Cynthia and I have really, really stressed is truth and reconciliation. For example, all of the members of Congress that have been blackmailed, they not only need to be freed from their dependence on corporate money, they need to be freed from the blackmail sword that hangs over their head. And so one of the reasons we want Donald Trump to lead #unrig is because he has the power to offer every member of Congress a presidential pardon, conditional on their sitting down on a professional debriefing on what they did that got them blackmailed and who their blackmailers are, and basically helping us capture and deal with these blackmailers. And half of these blackmailers are U.S. intelligence community professionals. This is not all on Israel and Saudi Arabia and Goldman Sachs and other foreign powers. Half of it is on us, okay? And this is all stuff I've learned since I left the CIA. So none of this is secret in any way, shape, or form. But the bottom line here is that if we wait until 2018, 2019, 2022, it's too late. This is literally a fork in the road. This is a cosmic moment in time when a lot of goodness is converging, when a lot of the truthers are converging, the JFK truthers, the 9/11 truthers, the pedophilia truthers, the ET truthers, which is not my community, but I respect what they're doing. So what's happening here, and I had this conversation today with someone over lunch after I went to look at the RV that we're planning to buy for $85,000. And we're now celebrating a song by a guy fundraising website. Leonard Cohen wrote a wonderful, wonderful song called Everybody Knows.
Okay. Yeah.
And what we're starting to realize is that the average American is far more intelligent and far more clued in to the stuff that you and I are concerned about.
That's true.
Than the elites realize.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows. But just like the AIPAC Zionists have been able to keep Congress in line with their AIPAC pledge, truth has been repressed. And the ability to do independent thinking has been repressed. So what Leonard Cohen is saying with Everybody Knows, and what Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are saying with the system is rigged, there's a window of opportunity here for 435 meetups. We have a national meetup. We love Meetup, Meetup Pro. So we have a national network of meetups. This has never been done in history. We are going to have a meetup that has an alt-right, alt-left, black, white, green, libertarian, independent. I would like very much to have a Jewish person in every meetup. And that meetup is going to be a microcosm of the district. And that meetup is going to confront the member of Congress every single day demanding that they sign the integrity pledge. And if they do, we celebrate. And if they don't, we have a candlelight vigil outside their home that is put on YouTube every single night. Okay,
well, that sounds like an interesting sort of soft pressure tactic.
It may not work. It may not work. I am doing what God has given me the light to do, and it's like throwing a stone out and seeing how many times it'll skip on the water.
Hey,
all
it's
I can
worth
do
it.
is
Today,
put that out.
Today on Reuters, we were able to watch a very huge demonstration in Hamburg, Germany, and we watched the cops try to subdue the crowd, and there was a great demonstration around G20. So there was a huge participation online. We were able to watch it in real time and be part of that demonstration. That's unheard of, and that is, you know, that harks back to the U2, you know, this kind of thing that they did, you know, which is concerts live online. I mean, we have ways to congregate people in large masses virtually. So I applaud that, and certainly that is the wave of the future.
Well, let me make a quick point here. You know, in the martial arts, they talk about wasted energy. And while protests, particularly peaceful protests, are important because they create a visual for the public, One of the reasons we called hashtag unrigged the summer of peace was because we were very concerned about George Soros Schwartz funding hashtag resist as a summer of violence. And what Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand is two things. The first is that all the governors, mayors, and university presidents are against him. They want violence. And the second thing is, I predict the Republican Party is going to collapse from a major pedophilia scandal in the next 6 months. And Vladimir Putin just came up and said to Donald Trump, if you don't reveal your senior elite pedophiles, I will. And I've just published in the Russian intelligence, my forward to the book and the table of contents for the pedophilia book are being published at the Russian International Relations Council website, where I blog on occasion, okay? This is out of the bag. So the point that I want to make is that organizing legally, ethically, and non-violently at this point in time is, in my view, more effective than angry, unfocused demonstrations that have absolutely nothing to do with the future of this country. It's just George Soros buying anger in the streets, okay? So we are reaching out to resist, and Dr. McKinney is working with the Green Party, particularly, to reach out to resist and say, please join us. Let's create the Second American Revolution, and let's simply confront our members of Congress together. And we want to ask the members of Congress to do three things: sign the Integrity Pledge, renounce the AIPAC Pledge, and start using SurveyMonkey to poll their constituents before every vote, so that they actually represent the constituents and not the special interests that have been bribing them and blackmailing them. So this is a turning point in American history, potentially. It could also fail, in which case, you know, I'll see if I can buy a sailboat someplace and go sail.
Okay,
but
now
this is my...
Okay, I appreciate that. Now, I wanted to ask you, because I've been listening to your other interviews, and I did hear that recently you made a very strong statement about September, saying that there was going to be a market crash or a crash, economic crash in
Please
September.
Let me correct you. I said that I believe Martin Armstrong,
right,
who is the source. Martin Armstrong
Yes.
went to jail for 7 years, refusing to give CIA his economic model because CIA is too stupid to create its own economic model that works. Okay, Martin Armstrong has never been wrong. So I am telling you, just like I'm telling people that I believe you and your work, but I have no direct access or knowledge, I believe Martin Armstrong is correct. And they're already starting to try to blame this on Trump. It would have happened whether it was Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump in office. But now they're spinning it and saying, well, the market's lost confidence in Trump. It's baloney. We're about to see a collapse that is based on corrupt banking practices that have been legalized. Matt Taibbi wrote a superb book called Griftopia, and it's about the merger of political and financial crime in this country. All right, the two-party tyranny is a criminal network, and it is legalizing high crimes at the top at the same time that it's created a neo-Nazi transportation security administration that they want to extend to bus stations as well as train stations. I was virtually strip searched in St. Louis, Missouri, in front of everybody, by a guy that picked me out of the crowd because I had the temerity to go over and inform his boss that Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney was traveling with the U.S. citizen who worked for Iran Press TV, whom we knew was going to be virtually strip searched, okay? This guy came over and had his hands on my balls because he had the power to do it. That is an unconstitutional search.
Okay, fair enough. But let's get back to the the potential economic crash in September, which, you know, because you're widely read and you are out speaking, really, you've done an enormous number of interviews lately, it seems to me. And so, and this push with Cynthia, it looks like you have a view of the future that people may be interested in. And you may have a good basis for believing Andrew, what's his name?
Martin Armstrong.
Oh, Martin. Okay, sorry, Martin Armstrong. And
I mean, by the way, his seminars are very reasonably priced at $2,500, and they sell out. I mean, this guy is a wizard. See, one of the things you need to know about me is, apart from reading a lot, I decide who to trust.
everyone
Okay.
does. Yeah. No.
Yes,
No,
and so
no shit.
I am telling you that I believe Martin Armstrong is a genius, and we should listen to him.
Okay. What I'm asking you, because you're my guest, is you've chosen to believe him. You're an educated man. Why? How are you looking at September? How are you personally dealing with it? How is Cynthia McKinney dealing with it? What are you going to tell people during that time? That's only a few months away. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, it is. And frankly, I'm very concerned that our president is not paying attention. He is not reaching out to the public. He is not making plans to keep everything going. He is literally, his idea of a long-term view is tomorrow's news cycle. And that really troubles me and concerns me.
How much of your information about Trump is actually about Trump and not just from the news? You know, in other words, do you have a back channel to knowing what he's really thinking and doing? Because I actually have a contact. You know, I deal with whistleblowers, and one of my secret intel sources has told me that Trump is actually a genius and that people don't realize that his IQ is very high.
I look, the guy.
I'm just saying,
the guy he has enormous potential.
What is your access to knowing what he
I'm
is
not
doing and
tell
thinking?
You the names of the three people.
No, I'm just saying you have
talk to Donald
sources.
Trump.
If you say
But
you have sources, I believe you.
Talk to Donald Trump.
All right.
And all three people have told me that Trump has read my memorandum for the president, which 4 million Americans have read in each of the 4 versions.
Okay.
It was also published, the long version was published in The Mind Unleashed in Zero Hedge. And what Trump is being told by Priebus and Pence and McMaster is that Steele is a raving lunatic and you absolutely should not talk to him. And Cynthia McKinney is a communist and you absolutely should not talk to her. And what all three told me is that Trump finally realized they were telling him that because I was absolutely the last person in the world they wanted him to listen to. Because I'm trying to save Donald Trump. If he does an election reform act, and if he does, let me just finish this. If he does an election reform act, if he does a Debt Be Gone website, if he does a counterintelligence push, and if he creates a Trump channel, which has two-way communications with the public so that he can pulse the public, then he'll be the greatest president ever. But he's not doing that. And the recent statement on NATO is absolute crap. NATO is a pimp for the horrors of war, and he knows that. And Poland is a pimp, okay? The crap that's going on in Poland today is absolutely outrageous. What George Schwartz Soros has done is the color revolutions were about replacing the communists with fascists. What we're looking at here is the rise of fascism around the world, including in the United States of America.
Sure.
And so I would love to believe that Trump is a genius and has a plan for taking down the deep state. I'm not seeing it.
Okay, fair enough. So as far as the future, and let's see, I'm just going to make sure that we have tackled some of these details here. You know, we are ruled by secrecy, and I am wondering, what is your solution to that?
Transparency and integrity. And I mean, I love Cynthia McKinney. She's a firecracker, and she can piss people off as I can, but her heart is pure. And it was Cynthia who came up with the concept of unity for integrity. I came up with the concept of getting all of us to set aside our ideological and issue differences, guns, gays, climate change, whatever. Nothing is going to get an honest hearing unless we have an honest government, okay? And so what I am offering, now, you know, I ran for president in 2012, and I was the briefer for election reform to Occupy. That video went viral. It made the front page of Reddit. I did a Gary Aleppo when my Gary Johnson, when my kid said, "Dad, you're on the front page of Reddit." I said, "What's a Reddit?" Okay. But I honestly believe that the citizens have the power this summer to take 435 members of Congress and say to them face to face, you either sign this integrity pledge and you renounce the AIPAC pledge and you put America first, or we are going to fire you. And I think that's why these whole ideas of Meetup and SurveyMonkey and Citizen Action focused on integrity rather than on issues, okay? All these issue groups, all these nonprofits, all these protests, all of that stuff is to keep people busy and not focused on the one thing that we can all come together on, which is restoring integrity to the U.S. Congress. Now, I think the members would like to be saved. And if the president were to lead #unrig, I think it's a no-brainer, especially if he's offering each of them a pardon in return for giving up their blackmailers.
Okay, so the oath that you want them to sign has to do with revealing that they are being blackmailed, correct?
No. You really need to read the integrity pledge. What it says, it's available free online at unrig.net.
Okay, but for the purposes of my audience here who aren't going to read it right this second.
The integrity pledge requires that the congressman agree to co-sponsor and vote for the Election Reform Act of 2017 when Congress reconvenes in September. The Election Reform Act includes 12 different specific things, and they're included in a graphic. And it basically includes things like paper ballots counted publicly on site, instant runoff, free access to the media, all the things that make for a real democracy. When James Baker gets on national television and says we have a functioning democracy, James Baker is a very smart man, and he's also a liar. We do not have a functioning democracy in the United States of America. So that's the integrity pledge. Now, we have added to that pledge a requirement to renounce the AIPAC pledge. AIPAC is an agent of a foreign power. And John F. Kennedy was assassinated in part because he was going to make all Jewish organizations that took money or direction from Israel register as agents of a foreign power. Now, I have no problem with AIPAC representing Israel and trying to stand up for Israel. I have a real problem with the congressman signing a pledge that says he will put Israel first. That's over.
Okay, very interesting. Yes, fair enough. All right, so given this current situation with the Australian Pope, to get back to this pedophilia situation, I've heard you talk about the Black Pope, but you seem to be skirting around the actual responsibility of the Pope, the so-called White Pope, who is apparently this man who is now being charged with heavy crimes and a history of crimes in this area, is a very close consultant to the Pope. So I don't think we can allow him to really, get away with his relationship with this other man, and the fact that he's probably quite lenient. His record shows, from what I understand, quite lenient on suspicions of pedophilia on the clergy, so to speak. So
I agree. I completely agree with you. I mean, I'm told that there is a war going on within the Vatican for control of the church. And for example, the Pope has ordered all Knights of Malta who are Freemasons out. So he is trying to clean house in certain areas. He is, however, overly tolerant. I think roughly 10% of all Catholic priests are pedophiles. That's a much bigger number than the 2% that the Catholic Church claims. And by the way, I don't know, but my reading suggests that the church decided to go with non-married priests because they didn't want to have the financial burden of widows and orphans. And what that ended up creating was a gay pedophile mess in the Catholic Church. Now, I am a lapsed Colombian Jesuit Catholic altar boy, okay? And I love the church. I love incense and the Latin Mass. And I know that 90% of all Catholics and 90% of all priests are good people. But just like the CIA, just like NASA, just like everything else, it's that 10% that is a toxic cancer on society. So I don't know whether the White Pope will triumph. Maybe like Donald Trump, he's a genius and he's just hiding it. You're right, he's been too lax, but I also think he is fighting for his life. And you will recall, his predecessor quit rather than die.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a huge history of the Catholic Church that really is linked up with the Nazis. You can't really separate the two.
Yes, I completely agree with that. But I will also remind you that the Jewish Zionists refused to ransom the Jews from Germany for $3 million. Okay?
Yes. I heard you say that on another show.
They funded Hitler. They funded Hitler.
All right. Well, so did George Bush.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And actually, my information is that Churchill, please. Well, my information is also that Churchill and the group that he was involved with basically set Hitler up and he got out of hand, a lot like Saddam Hussein.
And Lenin as well. The machinations that these banking families have been able to do, I mean, they literally do rule the world. They are masters of the universe. The problem is that they're treating all of us as expendable cattle. And I happen to believe in humanity, and I happen to believe in the cosmic infinity of human intelligence. We are a grand experiment in free will and imagination. And I believe that we are being held back by these people who are trying to control us, who think of us as useless eaters and so forth. There are 5 billion people whose minds are the one infinite resource we have. And one of the reasons I got nominated for the Nobel in Norway by a Norwegian was because open source everything engineering lifts up those 5 billion people at 10% of the cost of the failed Western model. So I am opposed to the 1% elite having the arrogance to think that they can treat all of us as cows in stalls.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to ask you some timely questions, before we, we've been going for a little while here. I'm not sure how long you want to go, but I will
follow your path.
Okay. I'd like to ask you some current questions, things that are in the news right now, and get your take on them. And, this is not rehearsed, and obviously this is off the cuff.
I understand. North Korea is not our problem. Let's start there.
All right. And why not?
It's not our problem. We should get all of our troops out of South Korea. And we should leave North Korea to China, South Korea, Vietnam, and that should do it right there. China, South Korea, and Vietnam are the 3 parties that should really be focused on Korea.
Okay,
we have
in
no
other words,
business being
the way
there.
you're talking about, sorry,
Donald Trump chewed the butt of the Belgians because they have been sneaking nuclear technology to North Korea for money. Okay. North Korea is not our problem. As a matter of fact, I've said publicly, the 1,000 military bases we have around the world are not there for military defense. They're there as lily pads to allow CIA and others to smuggle gold, guns, cash, drugs, and small children.
And you know why they're doing that? I mean, do you know why where the money is going? Are you familiar with Catherine Austin Fitts and her work on the Black Project?
I love her. She's blowing me off right now, but I love her. I think she's one of the smartest people we've got out there, and Cynthia McKinney loves her as well. That is an elegant, smart woman.
Okay, I've interviewed her several times.
I don't know where the money is going other than into secret things, to include the ozone layer had to go because it wouldn't allow certain things to come down to Earth from outer space. And, there's all kinds of crap out there I don't want to have to understand.
Let me just stop you right there, though. Come on, you cannot be short-sighted. You're going to have a very wide view, it appears. You want to be worldwide. You want to be conscious. And I don't see where you can put a lid on this question. So when you say North Korea is not our problem, let me ask you, if North Korea decides to do something, that means you think China is like the big brother that's supposed to slap them down. What if China decides to agree with North Korea? Then where do we stand? Then is North Korea our problem?
No.
Still not.
Look, I'm 65 years old, and I've probably done more grand strategy than you have or anybody else that I know. Grand strategy is about addressing all of the threats, okay, across all of the policies in an affordable manner so as to achieve peace and prosperity for the average citizen. We're not doing that. What the US government is doing today in our name is spending extraordinary amounts of money, not only on outer space and inner space, but on funding dictators like Saudi Arabia, $30,000 a year for every man, woman, and child in Israel, money that would be better spent here at home in the inner cities. NATO is not only a pimp for the horrors of war, it's also running Gladio, the stay behind false flag stuff.
Okay, let's talk about false flags. That's another issue.
Let me just finish. It's now known that the Red Flag terrorist group in Italy was a false flag terrorist group created by NATO to push the Italians into fascism, okay? So I would, if I were president, I would close all 1,000 bases overseas. I would have no security concerns in Asia or Africa. I would stop bribing and threatening leaders, like in the Congo, where we executed Patrice Lumumba because he wanted to actually have the natural resources of that country be for the benefit of his people. I would bring our military home. I would cut the military budget in half. The military budget today is 60% of our disposable budget, 16% of our total budget, and it's 50% waste. And within the money that is left, I know how to create a 450 ship Navy with global reach, so we can reach every embassy within 24 hours, a long haul Air Force, and an armored army. Right now, our army is bullshit. Our army is all these hoorah Rangers that would be wiped out by the Russians in 15 minutes. We cannot win a war with China or Russia on their ground today. It's impossible.
Okay, so you spent time, excuse me, you spent time, it sounds like, in the CIA, possibly in Marine intelligence, thinking of long-range strategies. Is that correct?
Not quite, and you shouldn't say possibly in Marine Corps intelligence. I was in Marine Corps intelligence.
No, okay. That's okay. The order in which I'm putting the word.
Let me just list the top 10 threats to humanity for you, okay?
Yeah, and I mean, if you're a strategist, that's valuable to our conversation, isn't it?
What's that?
If you're a strategist and you're an experienced one, that is valuable to our conversation here.
Thank you. Look, the top 10 threats to humanity that were identified by Lieutenant General Brett Scowcroft, one of the best, finest national security advisors we've ever had. Herbert McMaster is an overrated loser who is also a traitor. He collaborated with McCain and Brennan to get the Saudis and the Israelis to fund the White Helmet's false flag attack, which was a ground device, an improvised explosive device. An MIT professor has done a phenomenal job of showing that up, okay? Now, the top 10 threats to humanity are poverty, infectious disease, environmental degradation, interstate conflict, civil war, genocide, other atrocities, including pedophilia, mind control, and slavery, and then proliferation, terrorism, and transnational crime. Donald Trump today is falling into the same trap that all of his predecessors have fallen into.
What about artificial intelligence? Don't you consider that a threat to humanity?
I'm worried about artificial stupidity. These singularity guys are dangerous. I was a top IT person for a while. I helped found the Advanced Information Processing and Analysis Steering Group. I wrote the first warning letter to the White House on cyber warfare and cyber vulnerability in 1994.
Well, according to my whistleblowers, AI is much more of a threat. In fact, maybe more of a threat than negative alien influences and invasions going on currently. But since we're not going to go down that road, why don't you tell me why it is you think Putin is ready to announce the top pedophiles in our government here in the U.S. and not in Britain?
I don't know if he's not ready to do Britain. I think that's a brilliant question. Certainly, they should be identified. I mean, you can start with the royal family and the prime ministers, one of whom has just been outed as a pedophile. I mean, I helped create the open source intelligence unit for Scotland Yard, and I love those guys. But the bottom line is Scotland Yard, like the Federal Bureau of Investigation and 18,000 police jurisdictions across the United States, have all been told hands off on pedophilia. They're not allowed to touch it. Now, Trump and Sessions, to their great credit, although I think they jumped the gun, they should have done election reform first. They've been going after low-level pedophiles, and that was part of Trump's pressuring the deep state.
Okay, what about Satanism and the problem we have with Satanism?
Look, see, what the point I would make about Putin, he's probably the one guy that Trump should trust above his own staff. When Kennedy and Khrushchev were talking, they agreed that the greatest threat to peace between the United Nations, between the United States and Russia, were their own generals. The American generals were trying to tell Kennedy he had to nuke Russia. The Russian generals were trying to tell Khrushchev he had to nuke. Okay, when you're at the top like that, and I can't pretend to understand the agony that Donald Trump is going through every single day as president. It's got to be the toughest job in the world. But at the top like that, another president, particularly Vladimir Putin, is more valuable to you as a sounding board than all the traitors and miscreants below you.
Okay, that may well be true. All right, so I wonder, sorry, there's a fly here. What is it that you want to talk about?
Does it have an NSA logo? Does it have a NASA logo on it?
Exactly. Good point.
We've gotten the drones now. The drones now are down to fly size.
That's true. That's very true.
They're micro UAVs.
All right. Well, along those lines, what do you think about whistleblowers like Snowden? Do you think that he had help?
You know, Snowden's an enigma for me. You don't go from being a high school level security guard at NSA to being a CIA technical specialist in Geneva to be a Booz Allen highly paid IT person in Hawaii, unless this is a government operation. And so
says an intelligence recruiter.
I'm inclined to think that Snowden was an operation. And there are many different levels to look at it. It's possible that NSA tried to blackmail Obama or went one step too far, and Snowden was Obama's way of slamming them down. Because after Snowden, NSA has really had its hair trimmed a little bit. Also, the State Department is stupid, but they're not so stupid as to cancel his passport so that he has to stay in Russia. Okay, so when you add all these little things up, and also there's no way Snowden downloaded 1.8 million documents, and it may well be that there weren't 1.8 million documents. You know, just like this last bin Laden was a fake bin Laden. He was provided by the Pakistani military so that Leon Panetta could murder our SEALs and have some theatrical show for Obama.
That's
all right. So, and so Mike Flynn, who I know personally and like, and if I had to choose between Pence and Flynn, it's Flynn, no brainer. Mike Flynn was getting upset with CIA because they weren't revealing all the documents they had allegedly captured. Well, guess what? They weren't there. And the books that were on Osama, the last patsy Osama bin Laden's bookshelf, were picked by some kid in covert action staff, okay? This was all a badly done theatrical play, and it ended up murdering a whole bunch of SEALs, which really pisses me off.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And so do my whistleblowers. All right, let's go back to 9/11. Inside job?
Yes, absolutely. What we know, and let me give a shout out to Richard Gage. No, actually, let me start with the families of 9/11. It was the families of 9/11 who on day one understood that the government was lying to them, okay? And then out of those families of 9/11 grew the 9/11 Truth Movement. Here's what we know, and I have published a number of posts by different contributors. There's one in particular by Mongoose, which itemizes the 13 countries that warned us about 9/11 in advance. Dick Cheney said hallelujah, swore all 13 countries to secrecy, and then declared months in advance of 9/11 a national counterterrorism exercise for the day of 9/11. The dogs were taken out 2 weeks in advance and not allowed back. The Israelis spent a year deepening the channel so that they could take all the evidence out once Cheney's job was done. The FEMA Emergency Operations Center was set up on the piers of New York City on the night of the 10th. Okay, all of this is known. This was done under Dick Cheney's direct command. We threw the Saudis under the bus. They were nothing more than logisticians providing passports, and most of those people were not Saudi. They were patsies from a whole bunch of different countries. And oh, by the way, John Brennan was the embassy officer who signed the visas for all of those patsies. Okay? And so if you look at all of this evidence, this was, among other things, a collusion between Cheney, the Mossad, the evangelical Pentecostals that were willing to put a missile into the Pentagon. Drones hit the buildings. AIG was a party to this. Their whole floor was set up for theatrics in advance. The gold and jewels and everything was evacuated. This was absolutely insurance fraud, but it was insurance fraud with the complicity of the insurance companies, who may have gotten the $7 billion that they handed over to Larry Silverstein. They may have gotten that from the $250 billion that was laundered as part of the Gold War. If your listeners look up Black Eagle Trust, they'll get right to the document. Buzzy Krongard sat next to George Tenet and waged war on Russia from 1998 until 2001. I mean, Putin has been very forgiving. I would have nuked New York City by now. Okay? I mean, the shit that we have done to Russia is repeated acts of economic warfare that have been despicable and absolutely unwarranted and against the best interests of the American public. And by the way, all the insider trading has been traced back to Buzzy Krongard and Brown and Root and Deutsche Bank.
Okay. What about the false flags, Grenfell Towers? Because Grenfell Towers is apparently, it was insured prior to the so-called fire that took place.
It's
there.
also occupied by low-rent people that don't want to move out so they can build high-rise condos there. I don't have any direct knowledge.
Okay, but you do know that most of the incidents that are so-called terrorist is government-sponsored terrorism, and they're false flags.
Yes.
That goes across the board. Okay.
Yes. And I've written a chapter on how to tell a false flag. I ran a false flag for CIA. Okay, nobody died. A false flag means nothing more or less than not what it appears to be. Okay? I mean, false flag, the term originated with pirates. They would fly the flag of their prey until they got close enough to do a surprise attack. So 9/11 was a false flag attack.
And the same crews seem to travel the world. You're familiar with that?
Well, there's a mix. There's a mix of crisis actors, patsies, and mind control people. And I'm disgusted with the FBI because this last guy in Fort Lauderdale walked into the FBI before the Fort Lauderdale shooting and said, "Help me, please. People are trying to mind control me into doing a terrorist incident." And these idiots in the FBI, or maybe they're complicit, they didn't properly debrief him and take him off the street and put him under protective custody and get to the bottom of it. They let him out. And then he went and shot a whole bunch of people. And normally there's a designated shooter whose job it is to kill the patsy. Okay.
Well, you know that there's a patsy in Santa Monica jail right now who tried to do the same thing, who basically saw that what they were doing with the patsies in Florida was killing them, and he actually turned himself in.
He provided some good stuff.
He turned himself in, and he's still in jail right now.
If he is, yes. And see, part of the problem is CIA treats terrorism as a budget building exercise. There's an excellent book called The Terror Factory, which itemizes 175 terrorist incidents and convictions that were basically created and funded by the FBI. The one that sticks in my mind is the retarded Muslim kid who was living with his mother, and the FBI gave him $3,000 to move out and have his own apartment and create a terrorist cell. Okay, I mean, this is the insanity of this stuff is just mind-boggling. Let me point on false flags. Let me point to my analysis of Orlando. I have written an analysis of the Orlando false flag with 70 specific anomalies.
Okay.
I sent it to James Comey in advance of publication asking for comment. Of course, I never got a comment back. But the bottom line here is most of these things are, in fact, false flags, not necessarily by the government. There are now private military contractors. There are other organizations, Freemasons.
What about what's called the German DVD? A German intelligence service.
Germany's a vassal state to the United States, and the hostility between Merkel and Trump may be staged to some extent.
Are you familiar with the
intelligence
DVD?
agencies, let me say what the Dutch banker said. There's a very famous Dutch banker video that's out there now.
Yes, I'm trying to interview him, but he hasn't responded.
And what he has said, which I absolutely believe, is that all secret intelligence communities have degenerated into criminal networks. I agree with that.
Okay, fair enough. Are you familiar with the DVD? What is called? I don't know how to pronounce it. Sorry?
B, not D. B, bravo.
No. I'm talking about a German intelligence service based on the Avoir that came out through the World War II. It's talked about by Michael Shrimpton, and the initials are DVD.
No.
Okay, it's worth looking into.
I am focused on unrigged. You're the last time I'm going to talk about anything other than unrigged.
Okay, well, isn't unrigged about revealing the deep state?
No. Unrigged is about putting American people back in touch with power. It is focused solely and exclusively on restoring integrity to the U.S. Congress. Everything else comes later, and I will have gone sailing.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, please, you need to understand this distinction. I don't give a shit about any issue. What I want to do is put the American people back into the U.S. government. And I want to help them get in touch with their own power. Now, once you have an honest Congress, I would like to hope, if we're successful, then at least 50 of the representatives in the House of Representatives should not be caucusing with either wing of the two-party tyranny. And at least 10 senators should not be caucusing with either wing of the two-party tyranny. And those 50 and 10 should be Greens and Libertarians and Constitution, a couple of working families, maybe one or two from the Justice Party, and a whole bunch of independents. And the whole idea here is to make it possible to do evidence-based governance in the public interest. That's not what we have now. That is my sole and exclusive focus. Dr. McKinney and I have agreed to talk to no politicians and to take no stand on any issue, period.
Okay. All right. So at this point, is there anything else you want to discuss that we can talk about and that you're happy to talk about that will go down the road, the various roads? This is your last opportunity to do this. If that's what you're saying, you don't want to go down these other roads for a while now.
Well, I'm not shutting you down. I'm not shutting you down. I'm saying this is my last spy improv. All you ask me anything. Okay. So you reeled me in here. I mean, this is an accomplishment.
Okay.
So why don't you ask me what you want?
All right.
That is not related to unrig, and I will do my very best to be accommodating to you.
Okay, targeting with particle beam weapons and et cetera of individuals going on?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And in fact, my friend William Binney and Kirk Wiebe, who is as qualified as he is, these are two geniuses. These are two really stellar patriotic Americans. They have agreed to do a survey of targeted individuals. And my impression is that targeted individuals are basically experimental animals, and they're trying out various combinations. They're doing DNA-specific targeting now, and they're looking toward the day when they can find a human body that is so full of metallic and other harmonic elements that they can literally send that body a signal and have it burn up from the inside out and vanish with no body disposal problem. Okay, this is really sick stuff. And it's being funded by a combination of taxes on the individual American, borrowing from banks that we know we're never going to pay back, and a very, very big drug business. I'm absolutely convinced that Kathy O'Brien is right, and that NAFTA was about opening the border to drugs being sold by the U.S. government for off-budget purposes.
Okay, what about chemtrails and nanotech?
I think they're both part of infecting the public to the point that it can be tagged and bagged.
Absolutely. Okay. Have you got any, you don't have to say who they are, obviously, but can you acknowledge that you have sources that are from basically from, say, military and intelligence sources that are keeping you up to date with what's going on in terms of, we're talking about AI and
the short answer
all
is
the
no.
developments?
The short answer is no.
No.
I'm actually no longer spending a lot of time thinking about secret intelligence or reforming secret intelligence. I realized in 2012 that it is impossible to reform secret intelligence unless you have an honest Congress and someone like me as president. Okay, so my focus is on getting to an honest Congress. That's step one.
Okay, fair enough. So now what I'd like to do is I'm going to search for questions that I think are good questions that I might not have asked already. And if you, in the meanwhile, also have something to say that I haven't asked you about, but you wished I had, now's your chance to say it.
I really can't think of anything. Well, let me make one comment. I think too many people are dependent on the mainstream media. I mean, this hit job, I love this hit job. It backfired on them. Okay, because 20 or 30 million people, including you, who had really not thought about talking to me, came forward. And so thank you guys. And our fundraising skyrocketed. So this hit job actually helped me. Thank you. But what I'm finding is that too many people take crap at face value. And I'm getting 10 emails a day from people who haven't bothered to actually watch the Alex Jones show. The International Tribunal immediately created a 3-minute video of my comments on pedophilia. And it's that 3-minute video that is what the hit job is intended to keep people from watching. Okay? So the hit job is about discrediting me and getting people to not listen to the 3 minutes on pedophilia that was really, really valuable stuff on Alex Jones. Okay? And Alex fell for it. He should have realized he was being hacked. The other thing I'm finding is that this is a YouTube generation that doesn't read. I've written 12 books and hundreds of articles and chapters and testimony to congressional and White House commissions, and I've given lectures all over the world. I've got this long series of articles on human intelligence and augmented human intelligence, which is my alternative to artificial intelligence. It's about reinforcing the human. It's not about creating a stupid machine. People don't read that stuff. They don't see it. So what I try to tell people is if they want to understand me, do your homework.
Okay. Do you have any understanding or background information about the satanic circles? Because those are intimately related to the pedophilia issue.
The short answer is no, but it's a very, very important part of this. And one of the chapters in the pedophilia book and part of the investigation is into the satanic circles, which includes the highest levels of Freemasonry and the Knights of Malta. It includes sodomy as among men, not just children, as part of these satanic rituals. And it's really interesting because at that level, you start getting into mind control, and totally normal heterosexual beings appear to be totally willing to participate in sodomy as part of a ritual that makes them feel special. And it's not something I understand myself. I believe that the whole satanic ritual thing, including all these places that are blatantly out in the open with the owls, Bohemian Grove, all of these things need to be deeply, deeply investigated. The FBI has let us down. Now, you have to remember, the FBI was created by a pedophile, okay? J. Edgar Hoover took small boys from the mafia as gifts. So the FBI is not exactly your stellar cultural icon here. But the bottom line is they've let us down. There is no serious investigation being undertaken of all of these things. And we're letting these people literally get away with murder on a daily basis, including a whole bunch of Haitian orphans.
A whole bunch of Haitian orphans.
Haitian orphans. The Clinton Foundation is very dirty in this respect.
Okay.
And I want to give a shout out to Charles Murcott, I think his name is. He's done a tremendous job of compiling information on all of the fraud associated with the Clinton Foundation. There is a lot of evil in both the Gates Foundation and the Clinton Foundation. And I personally, as president, would not only eliminate all taxes, I would eliminate all tax exemptions. So all of these foundations would have to actually earn a living.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm actually scanning the chat. I'm not seeing any good questions just yet. So
while you're waiting for a good question, let me point out that book reviewing place, they're now showing only verified purchases. And I get most of my books in airport bookstores or from the authors themselves or whatever. So my reviews are not visible at Amazon, which I consider extraordinarily dishonest by Jeff Bezos, who probably doesn't even know that he's got a moron handling that section. But what I have done is at phibetaiota.net, there's a reviews page. And it's possible for you to get a graduate education in 2 weeks just by reading my summary reviews across the 98 categories. And I've also organized a number of lists. For example, I have a list on positive books about the future, organized in a number of different areas. And I have a list of negative reviews about the present, which goes into corruption and the military-industrial cabal and so forth. So all of my reading across 2,500 books that I reviewed is freely available there. And it's easy to exploit my reviews for free. And I really want to emphasize that to the extent I make sense and sound intelligent, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of all of those books and all of those authors that I have read and embraced.
Okay, very good. There is a question about the underground bases, and you did mention them, so you're aware of them. Do you know what the purpose is besides hiding the black projects?
Well, I've read the book. I've read the books on the breakaway civilization and so forth. And my bottom line is, I think that the U.S. government has been out of control since the end of World War II. And it's had this massive increasing budget, and it's had this state of secrecy. And so projects that start out as a germ of a good idea then suddenly grow into these monstrous things that nobody knows about. I mean, in the military, for example, when a deficiency is discovered in a weapon, it's classified. What that really means is you're giving a lifetime contract to the person who made the weapon with the deficiency, because no one else can fix it. Okay, so I don't want to get too far. You know, on the one hand, you have this. I mean, I love Kathy O'Brien's book. You know, and I have an 80-20 rule. I absolutely believe 80% of stuff like that, and then 20% I'm really not sure. But the bottom line here is that the deep state is at multiple levels. It's got a satanic level. It's got a pedophilia level. It's got an organized crime at a global scale level. And then it's got just abuse of authority and spendthrifts and other levels. And it's all about not working for us. The U.S. government is not of, by, and for we the people.
Okay,
and so that's why I'm focused.
What about the notion that we have a so-called commander-in-chief president of the United States who is only in office for 4 years, and he does not have access to a top secret level, a way above top secret level, above Q clearance, for example? Right. In other words, look, isn't that a problem? Right do you think the presidents should have a much higher classification access than they do?
I'll tell you what, if I were president, NASA's budget would be turned off on day one, period.
That doesn't actually answer my question. Okay, so you believe in transparency.
Look, Trump, I mean, I can't say it often enough. God bless Donald Trump, he's a disruptor. But Trump is being chumped. Mike Pence is the guy who's getting those top secret briefings, because everybody is assuming that Trump is on the way out and Pence is going to become the deep state figurehead.
Okay, big problem there. Okay, so Let's see. Just looking to see if there's anything else. We have a big problem with secrecy and privacy, but at the same time, it sounds like you do approve of having some kind of military defense, and you would fund a military. Isn't that correct?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. A military should be largely something that stays home, trains at home, and spends at home. It should not be all over the world. We are not supposed to be the world's policeman. And part of the problem here is Britain is absolutely certain it never lost the Revolutionary War. It simply infiltrated us by other means. Mm-hmm. And so we have become the United Kingdom's bully boy. And we are the chumps that are spending American taxpayer money to carry out the empire's wishes. That needs to stop. I mean, America first not only means not Israel first, it also means not the Queen first. It's really time that our citizens took control over their land, their banks, and their government, and their culture, okay? There is this massive effort to feminize men, to eradicate white males that would lead the resistance, to masculinize females, to make all kinds of perverse things legal. I mean, had Hillary Clinton become president, Loretta Lynch was ready to make pedophilia and bestiality legal. According to Senator Tom something or other, I can't remember his name, but a US senator came out with a copy of the Department of Justice memo saying these are the things we want to legalize in the next term. This is all insane. Okay. We're losing our culture as a country.
All right, what about things like Planet X? Are you aware of this? Do you have a thought about it? No idea.
No idea.
No idea? Okay. Coming from the intelligence community, knowing there's going to be a so-called crash in September, then what happens here in the United States as a result of that?
The honest answer is I don't know. If I were the president, I would be making this apparent crash very transparent. I would be having Martin Armstrong addressing the nation and saying, here's what I think is going to happen. I would be having a very transparent national summit with leaders from what I call the 8 tribes: academic, civil society, which includes labor unions and religions, government, commerce, law enforcement, media, military, and non-government. I would be having a big conference, and I would actually be trying to harvest the distributed intelligence of the whole nation and say, look, this problem is coming. What should we do about it?
Okay, what is G20 meeting about right now?
Don't know, don't care. They're irrelevant.
Why are they irrelevant if they're going to affect our future?
They shouldn't, not if I'm president.
Well, I mean, you are a realist, though. You know, what should be and what is are two different things, correct?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Look, the problem that I have is that Trump appears to have caved in. Whether it's because of bribery or blackmail, I do not know. But Trump right now has become no better than Obama.
Okay, I appreciate your sort of goading him to become a better man, and I think that that's, you know, worthwhile. However, I'm wondering if you are looking at the future in a logical way and asking yourself what should be done. Why is your focus so heavy on a president? And I do see that you're planning to sort of spread that focus out to Congress, and I appreciate that as well.
Well, the actual plan, we are realistic in realizing that Cynthia McKinney and I probably cannot succeed. All along, #unrigged has been intended as a gift to Donald Trump.
Okay. All right. Well, you know, there's no question that the system needs to be reformed. And I don't think you'll find an American that doesn't agree with that.
And let me say this, you know, because right now it looks like Donald Trump is playing the deep state's game, the deep state's rules on the deep state court, which is Washington, D.C., and places like the G20. Okay. What he needs to do is widen the court to the rest of the country, change the rules of the game with the Election Reform Act and the Trump Channel and a counterintelligence surge, and than be president for all of the people. I think that his advisors have seriously harmed him by not making him aware of the very high likelihood that the Republican Party will collapse from a pedophilia scandal in the next, but before 2018. Okay, and if that happens and there's no Election Reform Act, then the Democrats are not only going to take the House, they're going to take the Senate, and Donald Trump is toast.
Okay, why do you think pedophilia is goes along party lines?
What do you mean? It's both parties.
You're saying the Republican Party is going to. You're saying the Republican Party is going to collapse. Why isn't the whole system going to collapse? Why not the Democrats as well? I don't see them as innocent.
The Democrats already have collapsed. And they're gone. But if Trump allows the Republican Party to collapse,
because they're not in office, that doesn't mean they're gone.
This is true.
In other
and
words,
right now,
it's not a partisan. It's not a partisan matter, though. Pedophilia is not partisan. Wouldn't you agree?
You know Denny Hassert?
No.
Speaker of the House.
Sorry. Okay.
Pedophile.
All
Convicted pedophile. The
right.
top Republican in the House of Representatives, convicted pedophile. Franklin scandal, Spotlight in Boston, the interns in the White House. What's going to happen to Donald Trump, who is relying on the Republicans controlling both houses, is he's going to lose 2 governors and 4 to 6 senators and perhaps his own vice president. And when that happens, he has no power base. Because he hasn't built one.
Well,
this is a very logical point. Mr. President, you have to build your power base outside of Washington.
Okay.
That's all I'm trying to say.
I appreciate that. At the moment, I'm not seeing any really
Nobody's
good
listening.
questions. No, I mean, there's a lot of chat. They're talking to each other, but they are not asking any,
That's perfect.
And
That's
commenting.
perfect. I think you've run a fine interview, and I think people have seen enough of me to decide whether they want to pay attention to my work or not. Certainly, I validate what you have done and what Michael Sala has done and Corey Good and others. I think they're missing parts of it. I myself don't have the whole picture, but I certainly know enough to appreciate everything that all of you are doing. I realize there's a lot of disinformation packed in there. You will occasionally get guests that are just yanking your chain in ways that you may not realize until later, but that's okay. The subtitle of my last book, The Open Source Everything Manifesto, was Transparency, Truth, and Trust. That's what I'm about. Transparency, truth, and trust. And I would like very much to restore America the Beautiful.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Robert David Steele. I'd love to have you back on the show sometime. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about as we go into the future here. And I'm sure that there will be quite a reaction to this interview on my YouTube channel and out there. So let's see what that is. And I hope you'll be willing to consider coming back.
Well, we'll see. But thank you for the way that you managed me.
No
problem.
You
did what Alex Jones should have done.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for watching. We're going to close this down now, and I just have to figure out the logistics a bit. So bear with me while I handle this sort of screen situation, because it's not so simple. So 1 second here.